I'm the chair of the UNA-NCA's board, and I'm particularly pleased to welcome you here tonight. 77 years ago, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights became the first global statement that every person, regardless of nationality, background, relief, or other status, states that we deserve fundamental freedoms. This document was born from humanity's darkest hours. After witnessing the horrors of World War II, the world understood that it could not rely on goodwill alone to protect human life, equity, and liberty. Its principles continue to underpin global standards of dignity and equality that guides laws, inspire social progress, and helps protect peace. We are now in a troubling era of growing political division and disregard for international laws. As conflicts intensify, multilateral institutions weaken, and norms are routinely challenged and ignored. Today, as the world confronts overlapping existential threats, international law and human rights must be at the center of any meaningful global response. This year's official theme for Human Rights Day is Everyday Essentials. It is an important reminder that human rights shape our everyday lives. And we must remember that universal rights and freedoms can never be embodied and protected by declarations alone. It is people who embody and breathe life into human rights, which is why it is so important that we are all here today to honor our champions. Human rights can empower individuals and communities to forge a better tomorrow. By embracing and trusting the full power of human rights as the pathway to the world we want, so we can have a world that is peaceful, equal, and sustainable. Tonight at UNA-NCA, we want to bring attention to and acknowledge the importance or relevance of human rights in our everyday lives. So tonight, I urge you to listen to our local champions of human rights. And I want to give you a call to action. Listen to them and think about how you, as individuals, and we all as a community, put these ideas into action in our daily lives. We have an opportunity to advance equality as we encounter situations in our daily lives and speak up. So tonight, in honor of Human Rights Day, I'm going to read for the first time our land acknowledgement, which will be repeated hereafter at subsequent events. And I have to thank the committee who worked on that, Jill and Danielle and many others. So today, let's start again. So here it starts right now. Within the United Nations Association of the National Capital Area, we respectfully acknowledge the ancestral land upon which we are located here in Washington, D.C. The District of Columbia, Maryland, and Northern Virginia is the occupied territory of the Nacotchtank and Acostan, Piscataway, and ancient nations who were forcibly displaced in the 1600s. We recognize the native peoples who resided here and pay respect to their forebears and their descendants who remain today. We recognize the broken promises and harm during the first peoples of these lands, the horrors of American slavery, and the painful legacies of inequity that continue to persist. Consistent with the UN Charter, we affirm and reaffirm our commitment to respect human rights and to promote the peaceful resolution of conflict through dialogue and negotiation. So that is our charter that we will be reading from now on. I do now want to have a few thanks before we get started, to thank the UN Foundation and UNA USA for hosting us this evening and their support throughout this year. I want to acknowledge Peter Yo, Senior Vice President, and Rachel McCabe from UNA-USA. I want to thank our sponsors and partners who are listed on the cards and throughout the program. I want to thank board members. In case you don't know, we have a working board, so everyone contributes throughout the year to make our programs a success. We want to thank our advisory committee led by Sam Worthington and our other program committees. And we want to thank our UNA staff and volunteers. I have one little announcement about an auction that we're going to have, and you may not go run right now and look at the silent auction, but I'm just going to let you know that we have a wonderful photo session and a rug that will be on display throughout the program. And during the reception part later on, you'll have plenty of time to sign up for the silent auction. And a final big thank you to our President and CEO of UNA-NCA, Paula Boland. So even though Paula doesn't really need an introduction, since she's such an integral part of UNA-NCA and the person who truly makes everything happen, we are so lucky to have her in this leadership position. Paula is a lawyer with a background in environmental law and international affairs and brings a strong knowledge of the UN to our chapter. She is a strong contributor also to the larger UN community in DC. I think she is the perfect example of bringing youth into the organization of UNA-NCA and growing them into leadership positions. For those of you who don't know, and I'm looking at our volunteers and student members, she started out as a volunteer in the chapter and grew into more progressive leadership roles, culminating in the president of the chapter. Over to you, Paula.
Thank you very much, Anne, for those kind words. Good evening, everyone, and happy Human Rights Day. It is a privilege to welcome all of you as we gather to honor Human Rights Day, a day that reminds us of our shared responsibility to uphold the dignity, freedom, and equality of every person. Today, as we celebrate and commemorate 77 years of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, a document that boldly declared that every human being is born free and equal in rights. This version remains as urgent today as it was decades ago. It calls on us not only to believe in a better world, but to build one through our actions, our voices, and our unwavering commitment to justice. Human Rights Day is more than just a day on the calendar. It is a moment of reflection, a celebration of progress, and a renewed call for action. It is a reminder that human rights are not abstract ideals, but everyday necessities. The right to speak without fear, to live without discrimination, to learn, to work, to participate fully in society, and to dream of a future where all people can thrive. As we welcome you today, we also honor the courage of human rights defenders, those who stand up when it is difficult, those who speak up when silence will be safer, and who illuminate the path toward dignity and respect for all. Let today inspire us to continue that work. Let us strengthen our resolve to protect the vulnerable, challenge injustice, and ensure that no one is left behind. And let it remind us that each of us, in our own way, carries the power to advance human rights through compassion, advocacy, education, and everyday acts of humanity. Thank you for being here. for caring, and for choosing to be a part of the movement that makes hope possible. Together, we can help shape a world where human rights are truly universal and unshakable. Welcome, and may today ignite the spirit of solidarity and change in all of us. I want to thank again our host, the United Nations Foundation, UNA-USA, our sponsors and partners, all listed in your lovely program and our slides. And last but certainly not least, my staff and volunteers for all their hard work leading up to today's program, and a very busy fall for UNA-NCA for your ongoing commitment to our mission. Thank you very much. It is now my pleasure to call Liz Elizabeth, as she goes by Liz Philippe, Senior Manager of UN Affairs and Partnerships at UNFCU. Please, thank you so much for all the wonderful support UNFCU has provided us this year. In the past, we treasure our collaboration. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much for that warm introduction, Paul. Really just such an incredible pleasure being here. Members of the UNA-NCA family, good evening. As the financial cooperative that serves the UN community globally, the United Nations Federal Credit Union draws inspiration from our members' tireless work to build a more just and peaceful world. So we share your commitment to protecting our everyday essentials, human rights, and in having local impact on a global scale. It is therefore an honor for UNFCU to support UNA-NCA's Human Rights Awards and to have collaborated with you, with UNA-USA, with UN Foundation, really on so many purposeful initiatives ever since we opened our branch around the corner at 18th and H Northwest about a dozen years ago. As some of you may know, UNFCU delivers a sustainable and inclusive banking approach. We, together with our financial education and UN partnerships activities, work to contribute to the resilience and the prosperity of people and planet. This stems from our UN founders, our credit union ethos, and our core values that since 1947 have defined who we are and what we stand for. And allow me to provide just a few quick examples here. In establishing our UNFCU Foundation, we've made human rights a focus, and this provides access to critical health care, to quality education, to jobs training, working on behalf of marginalized women and youth, in collaboration with NGOs and UN partner programs, including UNFPA's remarkable efforts to combat fistula is just one example. We also lead a network of 200 credit unions that are united in sustainability. And we've harnessed the power of collective action, which you were speaking about, to increase financial inclusion, climate risk mitigation, and communities' economic growth. And they're each integral to strengthening human rights. And last on my list here is really the 10 principles of the UN Global Compact, to which we subscribe. Many of you may have heard of these principles, and they have engaged our movement of credit unions on implementing standards that encompass human rights and communicate on progress. So Eleanor Roosevelt, I have the pleasure, can't believe I'm standing right next to her right now, the chairperson of the Human Rights Commission, once said, "Where do universal human rights begin?" And she said, "In small places, close to home, so close and so small that they cannot be seen on any map of the world. Without concerted citizen action to uphold them close to home, we shall look in vain for progress in the larger world." So in this spirit, and on behalf of UNFCU's board and management and staff and volunteers around the world, we congratulate all the honorees tonight on their wonderful Human Rights Awards for their leadership. Speaking of leadership, special thanks to Paula and her team. Just so warm, and we've really appreciated our association over the years. But this is such a wonderful way to commemorate the Declaration of Human Rights, and in such a really important, meaningful way. So we want to continue the journey together, and as you said, leave no one behind. So thank you so much again.
And UNFCU for all of their support, our Eleanor Roosevelt Leadership Circle sponsor. Now, it's my pleasure to introduce a friend, a longtime friend and colleague, Will Davis, who is the director of the UN Information Center, Washington office. Will, just like I said to Lise, we are very grateful for the ongoing collaboration that we have through your office with all the UN family. Thank you so much for your leadership and for the support over the years. Will Davis will come and share with us a message from the United Nations on Human Rights Day.
As always, it's a real pleasure to be invited to participate in a UNA-NCA event. And in getting ready for my very brief remarks tonight, I figured, let me go look at one of last year's honorees, the High Commissioner for Human Rights, Volker Turk, and went to their website, and lo and behold, he spoke with the press, as one would expect, in advance of Human Rights Day, just a day before yesterday. And I thought, this will make my job easy. I can go grab some quotes. So I dove in, and I found this one. Quoting Volker Turk, the High Commissioner for Human Rights, "Our resources have been slashed, along with funding for human rights organizations, including at the grassroots level around the world. We are in survival mode." So I thought, I can't read that. It's depressing. But then the more I thought about it, and the more I heard the language that both Anne and Paula used in terms of a call to action, this really is the kind of clear-eyed look at reality that we need to face. This is the kind of situation that our Secretary General has issued his statement on, and where I think we need to redouble our efforts and acknowledge the work particularly of the organizations and the honorees that you're honoring tonight, and make sure that we do all we can to continue to support their efforts and to double our efforts. So with that as a preamble, let me dive right into Secretary General Antonio Guterres' statement today on Human Rights Day. Nearly 80 years ago, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, thank you, Eleanor, that's not in the statement, defined what every person needs to survive and thrive. It was a philosophical and political breakthrough, and it has been the bedrock of our global community ever since. Human rights, civil, political, economic, social, and cultural, are inalienable, indivisible, and interdependent. But recent years have brought a shrinking of civic space. We have grave violations that signal a flagrant disregard for rights and a callous indifference to human suffering. Together we have the power to confront these injustices by protecting the institutions that make human rights a lived reality. Every day, the United Nations helps people around the world realize their most basic rights. Together with civil society and governments, we deliver food and provide shelter, support education and elections, clear minds, defend the environment, empower women, and strive for peace. But we cannot do it alone. This work depends on all people, everywhere, taking a stand. When we protect the most vulnerable, when we refuse to look away, when we speak up for the institutions that speak up for us, we keep human rights alive. Our rights should never take second place to profit or power. Let us unite to protect them for the dignity and freedom of all. Thank you for the opportunity to share the Secretary General's statement with you tonight. And I think there's no better transition to acknowledging the remarkable work of tonight's honorees than to close with those words and look forward to the rest of this evening's program. Thanks again for inviting me.
Thank you, Will, again for your leadership and support. And now, we're going to start with the first award presentation. It is my honor to introduce Congressman Henry Hank Johnson, Jr., who has served Georgia's 4th District, Congressional District since 2007. Elected actually to his 10th term in 2024, he has earned recognition as one of Congress' most effective Democrats, championing legislation that strengthens civil rights, consumer protections, judicial transparency and accountability, and community safety. Also, our chapter had the honor of having you earlier this year, along with the UNA Atlanta chapter and Howard University Ralph Bunche Center for a good informational program we had along with you, Jimena, commemorating the 2nd decade of people of African descent. So Congressman, it's a pleasure to have you with us, and I'm going to ask you to come and present our first award, the Louis Bison Award.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. I'm honored to present the Louis Bison Human Rights Award, recognizing those who not only champion justice and dignity, but do so with persistence, courage, and most importantly, remarkable patience dealing with policymakers. You know, policymakers are not always ready to display their heart for humanity, and to get them to actually do something to address human suffering, you know, and you're looking around to see if anybody's going to be with you, or whether or not you're going to be in this all by yourself, and you don't know too much about it, you know, you're just hearing stuff, and people like Jimena coming to talk to you constantly, and there's so many problems that you just throw your hands up and say, let somebody else do it. So it's tough dealing with policymakers. Tonight's honoree is someone who has spent more than 25 years advocating for peace, justice, and the protection of the most marginalized communities across the globe. In other words, she is the definition of no days off. She's been a champion for human rights longer than Congress has been trying to pass all 12 appropriations bills before the end of the fiscal year. That's been a long time. I was wondering if y'all were going to get that. Jimena Sanchez Ghazali is currently the director for the Andes at the Washington office on Latin America, where she leads work on Colombia, Brazil, and Argentina. For nearly 2 decades, Jimena has brought the stories of those too often ignored directly to the halls of Washington. Afro-descendants, indigenous people, women, LGBTQ plus communities, labor leaders, and internally displaced persons, people and survivors of violence. How many should also be uploaded, or Jimena should also be commended for her work around drawing attention to ethnic minorities, especially through the descendants and indigenous people in Latin America who are disproportionately impacted by violence and displacement. When harmful policies come across her desk, She does not mince words. She does not whisper truth to power. She stands up and yells it from the mountaintop. From dismantling illegal armed groups, defending labor rights, and fighting racism, she has been involved in every corner of our collective struggle for freedom. From Colombia's peace process, Brazil's human rights crises, Argentina's push for justice, to Haiti's urgent cry for stability and respect, Jimena has been on the front lines every time. But her impact doesn't stop in the Americas. Before WOLA, she worked on international displacement across Africa, Asia, and Latin America with the Brookings Institution and the U.S. Representative for Internally Displaced Persons. She physically accompanied human rights defenders through Colombia who are threatened. That's how committed she is. I've seen her in action and been with her in unsafe situations. And she is committed and fearless. Most of us accompany people to the brunch, but she accompanies them through active conflict zones. And if that wasn't enough, she has also worked at the New York Attorney General's office, the New York City Mayor's office, Amnesty International, the American Red Cross, U.S. Committee for Refugees, and still somehow she found time to found and run the SAIS Refugee Forum for 7 years. I'm starting to think that she discovered a 28-hour day the rest of us weren't really informed about. I need to get more information about that. Through all of her work, Jimena reminds us that human rights is not a slogan, it's a promise, a responsibility, a daily commitment to ensuring that every person is treated with dignity, no matter their race, gender, identity, or nationality. Her legacy lives in the peace agreements she pushed forward, the communities she protected, and the countless lives she has uplifted, not through charity, but through empowerment and solidarity. For her extraordinary impact, unwavering courage, and relentless pursuit of a more just world, it is my great honor to present the Louis B. Son Human Rights Award to Jimena Sanchez Garzoli, a defender of humanity in every sense of the word. Congratulations, Jimena.
When I first learned that I would be the 2025 recipient of the Louis B. Son Award, my initial reaction was one of complete surprise. Fighting for human rights is a collective effort, not an individual one. It would be entirely disingenuous of me to state that this recognition was my doing. It is not possible to protect, prevent, seek justice, and guarantee dignity for others as one person. It is done side by side together in consultation, partnership, and in alliance with many other people, with leaders of all creeds and stripes, Afro-descendants, indigenous, LGBTQ+, victims, internally displaced leaders, whistleblowers, and lawyers. And it requires buy-in, interest, and action from elected officials, especially some of my favorite ones, such as Representative Johnson, multilateral organizations like the United Nations, the press, donors, and the general public. Many times, I found myself working with persons who form part of the structures generating the abuses, such as governments, companies, and illegal armed groups that were willing to take risks to tell the truth, to prevent harm, stop it, or do the right thing. Many people are willing to figure out how to do the right thing and help others when it becomes clear how they can do so. Other times, they want an independent or outside voice to help change what they see right in front of them. But due to hierarchy, structure, cultural, or political sensitivities, they cannot do so by themselves. To move things on a macro scale, we need to align with and build coalitions. Emergency actions require split-second decisions and a willingness of many to add their energy, expertise, and social capital. Coalitions and alliances within and across the Americas, Europe, and the United States played an important role in advancing change. I am the human rights, peace, and anti-racist activist standing before you today because I also had great teachers, my mentors at the Brookings Institution, especially Roberta Cohen, Francis Deng. The support at Peace Brigades International, Washington Office on Latin America, Colombia Acuerdo de Paz, all of those colleagues. It is also because of the ethics instilled in me by my parents, Sylvia and Danielle, and all the sacrifices they made so I could do the work. My one desire is to be able to replicate and do the same for my daughter, Solange. This recognition would not be possible without all these people and organizations. However, I will not sugarcoat it. Advocating for human rights has its challenges. You have to have thick skin and accept that you are not going to win any popularity contests. At times, you may even have to break ranks with peers, step on toes, and make mistakes to learn how you can advance cases and issues. To break paradigms, you need to accept that you will often be misunderstood. You will be disliked, attacked, persecuted, talked about not so nicely, unjustly accused of falsehoods, insulted, mistreated, and face physical harm and potential death. Perhaps the hardest thing to accept is that you also lose amazing, courageous people. You see the evil, sadistic side of humanity, full of dehumanization and disrespect for life. My heart was broken with the murders of many, including Orlando Valencia of Higuamiando, Bernardo Cuero of Afrodes, and the 2004 massacre of 7 people with chainsaws in the San Jose de Apartado community. With all those tragedies, however, comes great responsibility to carry those people's dreams forward, their principles, ideals, and visions of humanity, which with each horror comes more energy to fight stronger. In addition to the collective allies and supporters, this recognition is for all those persons who risk everything to defend the vulnerable, persist despite oppression, and fight for their dignity, memory of their ancestors, and way of life. As a defender, you also witness that armed conflicts destroy everything, including people's souls and their physical environment. The madness of war and violence pushes people to the brink and to commit unimaginable atrocities. Persons are unjustly treated, their lives destroyed, and sometimes it's hard to accept that who lives and dies or suffers irreparable harm is really arbitrary. You see many different types of bullying, indignities, and hatred. On the flip side, there is great joy and exhilaration when a peace agreement is reached after 5 decades of a bloody armed conflict, when a person held hostage by a guerrilla group is released, when consensus is reached to improve the lives of people, when a court rules in favor of victims who've been stigmatized for daring to seek justice and reveal criminality for 16 years, and when a person at risk finds safety in another place, or a long-time Afro-Colombian activist becomes the vice president of her own country. In almost all these cases, it took imagining what at one point was considered impossible or completely undoable. When that happens, you see human rights and justice at work. My second thought upon hearing about the award was, what am I going to say? Not so much because I don't have a lot to say. People who know me, I have a hard time not speaking out when things are unjust, but because political circumstances are such that what I want to say today could get me in trouble. The reality that I am no longer in a privileged place where I can fully speak my mind without putting myself and others at risk of reprisals hit me. It is sobering to see how quickly so many principles and rules of engagement that guarantee coexistence, respect, dignity, and justice can be dismantled. In the past, I ponder what I would have done if I had lived through such times in the past, like during the transatlantic slave trade, colonialism, or situations of fascism and genocide. I always thought that I'd fight, act, and do whatever I had to do to stop the horrors. Today, we are seeing a global erosion of liberal democracy and principles of fundamental human rights and respect for international humanitarian law. The global consensus that came out of the ashes of World War II and was built through international and United Nations is being challenged. Multilateralism, which is more needed now as the world faces collective transnational problems such as climate change, pandemics, and overpopulation, is being demonized by some. As things erode, the bar becomes lower and the unforeseeable starts to become normal, normalizing what we should have never accepted in the first place. This is a moment where we all need to ask ourselves where we stand and what we're going to do about it. In the French absurdist play, Rhinocéros by Eugene Ionesco, a small town becomes overrun by rhinoceroses. People decide to metamorphose into the animal, either because they think if they can't beat them, join them, out of fear, or because they attempt to remain neutral. People often conform in the face of great obstacles and mass movements. However, it is the one imperfect person who questions and refuses to accept the changes who manages to crack the phenomenon. Human rights are not abstract principles, they are lived realities. Like most things in life, you need to pay attention and take care of things. Otherwise, you might lose them. Choices must be made between safety and fear, between opportunity and exclusion, between hope and despair, and between comfort and sacrifice. We need to think forward and not backwards. It's not what was that is gone, but what we envision for future generations. We should not accept the erosion, but rather see it as an opportunity to revamp, remodel, and reimagine a new world order. We shouldn't be afraid of change, and perhaps the old ways need some remodeling. Let's figure out now what worked and what didn't, why, and build a new consensus on human rights and multilateralism for the 21st century and for this digital era. So on Human Rights Day 2025, let's remember change is possible when compassion becomes action, when we listen to those who've been ignored, and when we transform empathy into policy, advocacy, and community. Let's figure out how we can protect everyone's freedom, existence, make resolving peace and conflict popular again, and inspire actions that guarantee that every life is treated with dignity. We do not have to accept actions that are wrong, damaging, and destructive to humanity. We must protect our human rights defenders who are persecuted, and we have to stand up to the bullies and diminish their powers. I am deeply humbled by this honor and thank everyone who has believed in our shared struggles. And let's continue building a world where activists can operate without fear of harm, people's freedoms are protected, everyone is valued, diversity is celebrated and valued, and every life is treated with dignity. Thank you.
Can I just say wow? Thank you so much. Sometimes this is emotional. I'm just so proud of our awardees today. The next award is the Perdita Houston Human Rights Awards. And this award is presented to persons who advocate to eliminate discrimination against women and girls around the world and have made significant contributions for greater gender equality through increasing economic opportunity and development, promoting human rights, and supporting peace and security for women and girls. So the person that we have presenting this award today is Ambassador Geeta Rao-Gupta, former U.S. Ambassador at Large for the U.S. Department of State, Secretary Office of Global Women's Issue, GWE as it's called, or as it was called, who also previously served as the president of the International Center for Research on Women, ICRW, for 14 years, and that is for where I first met her. And I saw what was sort of an idea by USAID to start a think tank turn into an independent, probably I would say the best think tank at the time for women's issues. And now Ambassador Gita Rao-Gupta is the principal of the Alliance for Diplomacy and Justice. So I'm very honored to ask you to come up and present the award to Sia.
Thank you so much. I'm truly honored to present the Perdita Houston Human Rights Award to my cherished friend and longtime colleague, Sia Navroji. It is an award that's named after a remarkable woman, Perdita Houston, who was an American journalist and a women's rights activist who dedicated her life to promoting the rights of women and the right of women to have control over their reproductive and economic destinies. And for that reason, the UNA-NCA each year gives this award to individuals, as Anne said, who have made significant contributions to advancing gender equality and eliminating discrimination against women and girls around the world. And all of that makes Sia Navroji the perfect choice for this award. I have known Sia for more than 3 decades. She and I have worked closely on a range of issues from reproductive health, family planning and HIV prevention, to women's and girls' safety from violence, economic opportunity, and participation in community development. Justification for prioritizing each of those issues can be made based on public health outcomes or economic returns. But in each instance, Sia never let me forget that the primary reason for focusing on these issues was the right of every individual to live a life of dignity and worth, particularly the most vulnerable and marginalized. She has always believed in that North Star, that the fundamental reason to advance gender equality is because all human beings, women, men, and gender non-conforming people, regardless of race, religion, class, language, or national political affiliation, are born free and equal in dignity and rights. Quietly and without any fanfare, but with a spine of steel and a fierce determination, Sia has remained committed to human rights and feminist values, values of justice, equality, and dignity. Those are the values that she imbibed from her parents. The late Feroz Navroji, a celebrated human rights lawyer and a warrior for justice in his beloved Kenya, and her mother, Vilu Navroji, who is with us today, an educator who passed on those values, not just to her children, but also to the hundreds of students who over the years sat in her classroom. Sia and her siblings grew up watching their father courageously defend those who spoke out against authoritarian Kenyan leaders, and observing their mother provide refuge and care for families of dissidents who had been wrongly incarcerated. As Vilu told me, her children were creatures of our household. They knew no other way than to stand up for social justice. Influenced by the UN conferences on women, particularly the third one held in Nairobi, which Sia attended as a teenager, women's rights and gender equality became Sia's social justice cause. Through the work that she did at the International Women's Health Coalition, UNICEF, the Aga Khan Foundation, and the 3D Program for Girls and Women, as well as the leadership role she currently plays in the Girls and Women's Program at the UN Foundation, Sia's work has had impact. It has shaped new thinking, influenced policies, and improved programs, thereby affecting change in the lives of girls, women, and entire communities around the world. Her most recent effort, in collaboration with colleagues here at the UN Foundation, to document and memorialize the history of the global women's movement, like so many of her other publications, has reminded us that working together through principled action is the only way forward. And through all that serious work defending democratic ideals, the Sia that I know is also a fangirl of Shah Rukh Khan, the famous Bollywood actor, and for the iconoclastic musician Freddie Mercury, a fellow East African of Zoroastrian, both of whom, I have to say, in their own way, are also known for challenging the status quo. Thank you to UNA-NCA for recognizing Sia's contributions and commitment to gender equality and human rights, and doing so in the presence of those who support and love Sia, her mother Vilu, her husband Alex, who's with us, her son Darius, and I'm sure her father Feroz is beaming with pride from above. Regrettably, Sia could not be with us today because of a previous travel commitment, but she has a recorded message for us.
Greetings. Thank you so much to UNA-NCA. It is a great honor to receive the Perdita Houston Human Rights Award, and to now stand alongside the powerful women who have received this award before me. Perdita Houston was an extraordinary woman who understood the power of women across the globe and their stories. And it is women telling their stories who have inspired me throughout my advocacy for girls and women's rights. Whether I was working on reproductive justice, HIV/AIDS, gender-based violence, girls' rights, or global cooperation in women's rights, I have been inspired by extraordinary women. Some of those women are in the room today. To them and to so many others, I say thank you. One of the reasons I'm particularly proud of this award is that human rights are often seen as separate from advocacy on gender equality. Anyone who has worked on either knows that they are one and the same. And it is not surprising that it was a woman, Indian freedom fighter and member of the Indian delegation to the UN, Hansa Mehta, who is credited with changing the Universal Declaration of Human Rights phrase from all men are born free and equal to all human beings are born free and equal. Yet that is not how our advocacy and funding systems are set up. Too often, gender equality is seen as separate from the human rights framework. But it is through the advocacy of feminists that we, as a global community, have recognized, for example, that violence against women is a human rights violation, that rape is a weapon of war, and that in many countries now, girls have the legal right to education, and women have the legal right to equal pay and inheritance. But still, there is no country on earth where girls and women have the same rights as boys and men. With our focus on discriminatory laws, gender-based violence, global norms and standards, and supporting women's movements, the Girls and Women Strategy team at the UN Foundation continues that work. So to have my work on gender equality recognized as work that has advanced human rights is particularly precious. And again, I thank UNA-NCA. It is particularly powerful in this moment, in which those of us working in international affairs and development are seeing unprecedented challenges. We are seeing governance systems and global processes that we trusted pulled down. We are seeing long-standing norms around gender equality, human rights, and global cooperation being derided and ignored. And the impact of this disruption on gender equality is devastating. UN Women reported earlier this year that 1 in 4 countries is reporting a rollback in girls' and women's rights. And as we see the rise of autocratic male leaders and the crumbling of democratic systems around the world, the Reykjavik Leadership Index shows that confidence in women's leadership is falling across the globe. And when we look across variables ranging from bodily autonomy, tech-facilitated violence, even mobility and education, we see that girls around the world, from Afghanistan to the United States, have fewer rights than their mothers, and in some cases, their grandmothers. There is no point when human rights advocacy is ever done. There will always be those who push back against us. This is a lesson I learned from my parents, both strong advocates for the most vulnerable. They taught me that through each fight for the rights of an individual, we are protecting something much larger than ourselves. Through their work in law and education, they served as role models for me, demonstrating on a daily basis what it means to protect and advance the rights of everyone. And one way to do this is to work in community with others. And anyone who knows the important work of the United Nations Association, and indeed the United Nations, knows that a fundamental principle behind our work is that none of us can do what we do alone. Former Secretary General of the UN, Kofi Annan, used the phrase problems without passports to describe the global challenges that transcend national borders and require global cooperation. My team's research on the global women's movement and the UN highlights how women, coming together across borders, were responsible for creating transformative change in just one generation, and they continue to drive that change necessary for half the human family to enjoy our rights. So today, as I accept this award, I would like to once again thank UNA-NCA for this honor, and to thank my family for the foundation they laid for me, and the wonderful community of women who inspire and support me every day. Thank you.
In Sia's absence, her mother, UNA-NCA, will accept the award on her behalf.
Greetings. Thank you so much. Greetings.
Our next award, Our next award is the F. Allen Tex Harris Human Rights Diplomacy Award. This award is presented to current or former American diplomats who have, 1, advocated respect in American diplomacy for international human rights as defined by the UN Charter, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and other international human rights treaties and instruments. 2, made significant achievements in human rights through the use of diplomacy. And 3, demonstrated leadership in the diplomatic community on human rights issues. As we start with this award, I'd also like to acknowledge the presence of Julie and Scott Harris, Texas children, in the audience. And I would like to just say a little bit before Scott gets up here and does the remark that I was lucky enough to meet Tex Harris when I was a 24-year-old. And my husband was being sworn in to the State Department's A100 class. I was also from Dallas, Texas. I had also gone to law school. And we had this great conversation. It was the kind of thing that this luminary, taking the time to talk to a 24-year-old just because I was from Texas and went to law school, was really very moving. And his kindness to me touched me at the time. You have to remember at that time, if you were a spouse, you were called a dependent spouse, and you had no identity, even if you were a lawyer and anything else. And Tex Harris talked to me like I was a person that mattered. That's the kind of person he was. I was very honored to be able to watch him to continue to grow in the legend of the foreign affairs community, meeting him at such a young age. He was truly a truth speaker and human rights champion in everything he touched. The American Foreign Service Association also named an award in his honor, and he continued to serve as president of AFSA and contributed after his foreign service retirement. He is very much one of the luminaries of the Foreign Service. So to present this award, I'm honored to present Scott Busby, who's actually a senior advisor now at Human Rights First. Scott is a former Tex Harris Human Rights Diplomacy Awards honoree, so it's a special honor to have him do this. He was former DAS, Deputy Assistant Secretary of State, in the Bureau of Democracy, Human Rights, and Labor. And this year, he participated as a speaker in our Graduates Fellows program, and we were very honored to have them. So Scott, I'm going to ask you to come up and present this to a wonderful awardee and very worthy of the Tex Harris Award.
Well, thank you very much, Ann. I do have to say that the year I received the Tex Harris Award was the COVID year. So it was a virtual ceremony, so I didn't have the benefit of being able to see all of the people in person who were watching. So it's a pleasure to be here with people actually in the room to award, Azra Zaya, with the Tex Harris Award this year. It's an honor to join you tonight to introduce Azra Zaya as the next recipient of the Tex Harris Human Rights Diplomacy Award. For those of you who don't know her, Azra always likes to do things in groups of 3. She makes this point regularly. And I have dutifully sought to follow her example in that regard by working for her not once, not twice, but now 3 times over the course of my career. But I can attest to the fact that her life's work has been centered on advancing human rights. One little story before I get into the substance of my remarks. One of the first things I did on my first job working for Azra was to travel with Azra to Brussels, Belgium, for a human rights dialogue on human rights in China. And we got onto the plane, and like most State Department diplomats, we were escorted to the back of the plane because we can only fly economy. So I said to Azra, well, my seat is back in this direction. She said, well, my seat's back there too. And sure enough, wouldn't you know it, Azra's seat was directly in front of mine. So over the course of the flight, I was wondering to myself, gosh, is Azra going to recline or not? And what am I going to do if she disrupts my dinner, that sort of thing? But fortunately, early on, Azra was committed to my human rights, and she didn't recline for the entire flight. No, in all seriousness, let me say that for more than 3 decades, Azra has been a model of principled, people-centered diplomacy. From her earliest days in the Foreign Service as a human rights officer in Syria, to her role as Undersecretary for Civilian Security, Democracy, and Human Rights, and now as the leader of Human Rights First, she's carried a consistent message into every room she enters, namely that American leadership is strongest when it stands firmly on the side of justice, inclusion, and the inherent worth of every human being. Her career has taken her across multiple continents through some of the most complex and challenging issues in global affairs, from supporting democratic movements and human rights defenders under threat to protecting members of marginalized groups such as women, religious and ethnic minorities, LGBTQI+ persons, and persons with disabilities, to promoting safety and security for the world's refugees. In moments when many would have opted for convenience or caution, Azra chose conviction. But what makes her leadership truly exemplary is not only the policies she has shaped, it is the people she has empowered. Whether working with civil society activists in repressive environments, supporting refugee families rebuilding their lives, or mentoring the next generation of U.S. diplomats, Azra has led with empathy, integrity, and a profound respect for human dignity. She has elevated quiet voices and advanced the careers of those who are underrepresented in our public life. And she brings humanity to high-stakes diplomacy in a way that reflects the very best of American public service. It's thus extremely fitting that we honor her tonight with an award named for Tex Harris, a diplomat, as we all know, who believed deeply in speaking truth to power, defending the vulnerable, and demanding accountability even when it was difficult. Like Tex Harris, Azra has never shied away from the hard fights because she knows what's at stake when the world looks away. And at a time when democracy is under increasing risk, when authoritarianism is on the rise, when human rights defenders face growing danger, when asylum seekers and refugees are under severe threat, Azra's leadership reminds us that America's strength comes not merely from its power, but from its commitment to the universal values found in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Azra's work ensures that these values are not abstract ideals, but living commitments carried forward in policy, diplomacy, and action. So tonight, we recognize not only a distinguished public servant, but a compassionate leader, a tireless advocate, and a true partner to those around the world who refuse to give up on freedom and human dignity. Please join me in welcoming the 2025 recipient of the Tex Harris Award, Azra Zaya.
Everything Lucas with us?
Well, good evening. Good evening, everyone. And I'm just so honored to join this remarkable lineup of honorees. I am truly honored. I think my remarks were taken off the podium, so we'll swap with Scott to have done a switcheroo. But at any rate, I want to thank Scott for his very kind words. You're there, right behind here. For your human rights leadership over decades and your all too kind words. And I'm also just so honored to be following in the footsteps of people like Scott and the incredible other Tex Harris honorees who have graced this stage virtually and in person. I want to share my own story of meeting Tex Harris. I too, like Anne, met him very early, in fact, in my A100 class in the Department of State some 35 years ago. And listening to Tex's courage of conviction, it really was a game-changing, formative moment in my career. It helped shape the trajectory of my diplomatic career that followed, from my time as a third tour human rights officer in Hafez al-Assad, Syria, to the incredible experience working under Mike Posner and serving as acting assistant secretary of DRL in the Obama administration, to my most recent role in the Biden administration. So inspired by Tex's example of speaking plainly and speaking truth to power, let me be forthright about the state of human rights diplomacy today. Borrowing a word from Anne's opening remarks, we are at an existential crossroads for the defense of freedom and democracy around the world, including here in the United States. And how we respond is going to have a direct impact on American security, prosperity, and well-being for years to come. This is not a question of red versus blue, the heartland versus the cities, or MS Now versus Fox News. It's also not the exclusive purview of Washingtonians like myself, and that's why I think the UN designating this Human Rights Day as about everyday essentials is so important. Because the trajectory of democracy and human rights globally matters to every American, regardless of one's politics, faith, background, zip code, or even your Spotify Wrapped playlist. But on a sobering note, the warning signs are too abundant to ignore, such as the recently released U.S. national security strategy that deprioritizes human rights in U.S. diplomacy, except when it comes to our democratic European allies, and it embraces fringe great replacement white nationalist narratives in migration policy. We've also seen longtime U.S. allies questioning U.S. staying power that underpinned transatlantic security for the last 75 years. We witnessed the spectacles of the United States exiting the UN Human Rights Council and boycotting its own Universal Periodic Review. And we witnessed the decimation, the actual termination of the U.S. Agency for International Development and the decimation of bureaus responsible for human rights, multilateral affairs, refugees and population, the elimination of the Office for Global Women's Issues, the Office for Global Criminal Justice, and the Office for Conflict Stabilization. All of these moves collectively have dealt a debilitating blow to international peace and security, but also human rights and humanitarian support. Now, this is all happening as we approach the 2-decade mark in a global democratic recession, per the dedicated experts at Freedom House, a storied, nonpartisan organization whose life-saving support for human rights defenders under siege globally has been eviscerated by U.S. funding cuts. And make no mistake, the United States has joined the ranks of nations in democratic decline. This is according to respected international observers like Civicus, as the rule of law, freedoms of expression and association, and separation of powers enshrined in our Constitution have been under near daily assault since January 20. So my question for all of us is, do we stand by, admire the problem, look the other way, or do we try and build a better bipartisan alternative? As someone who devoted much of her adult life to working to advance human rights and national security in tandem abroad, under 6 presidents, Democrat and Republican, allow me to make the case for the latter. And at a moment when some question the cost benefit or very legitimacy of standing up for freedom abroad, I'd like to focus on 3 dimensions of U.S. human rights leadership where a renewed bipartisan approach is crucial to anchoring American security, prosperity, and well-being for years to come. Number 1, U.S. human rights leadership makes Americans safer by keeping authoritarians in check and rallying allies and partners in common cause to push back. Ronald Reagan recognized this in his famous speech at Westminster in 1983, when he made the case for promoting an infrastructure for democracy overseas that resulted in the creation of the National Endowment for Democracy and its family, which has provided critical support to thousands of human rights champions around the world and earned bipartisan support. In my own most recent diplomatic role, traveling to over 60 countries, I saw firsthand the heavy toll of authoritarian overreach in every region of the world, but alongside it, the promise of collective pushback. Take the devastating impact of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, which generated Europe's worst humanitarian and refugee crisis since World War II. It upended global food and energy security from Africa to the Americas, and it involved Russian abduction of tens of thousands of Ukrainian children to fates unknown. But the Kremlin's aim of erasing Ukraine's democracy overnight in 2022 was thwarted, thanks to the courage of the Ukrainian people and government and the determination of the US and other partner nations and the United Nations to support them. Much of that crucial US support for Ukrainian refugees, civil society, anti-corruption champions, and prosecutors of war crimes was upended by US funding cuts this year, contravening bipartisan congressional appropriations. Add insult to injury, the Trump administration incorporated Russian positions on territorial concessions and NATO into its 28-point peace plan for Ukraine and won Kremlin plaudits for its just-released national security strategy. Putin could not have asked for a better gift as he approaches the 4-year mark of his further invasion, as the White House endorses Russian land grabs that he could not secure by force, even with the steadfast help of fellow autocrats in Tehran, Pyongyang, and Beijing. Keeping autocrats in check is also a vital strategic aim of U.S.-China policy, where bipartisan convergence made possible legislative breakthroughs like the Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act and the Tibet Resolve Act, both aimed at holding the Chinese Communist Party to account for its brutal suppression of religious and ethnic minorities. I saw this bipartisan dynamic play out as a commissioner of the Congressional Executive Commission for China. And this is a long-time platform for courageous rights activists, scholars, and journalists to call out CCP abuses inside and beyond China. But rather than bolster their efforts, the United States terminated USAID support that helped democratic Tibetan institutions grow and flourish in exile. It eliminated the prospects of Chinese nationals fleeing religious or political persecution to obtain refugee protections here. And it silenced the broadcasts of Voice of America and Radio Free Asia that delivered uncensored truth to hundreds of millions of listeners in China for decades. It's striking that human rights are not mentioned once in the National Security Strategy section on China. And once again, President Xi could not have asked for a better gift, particularly at a moment when the PRC is flexing its muscle to menace Taiwan, an issue that the same strategy reduces to supply chains, ignoring the strategic import of Taiwan's tremendous democratic trajectory. This brings me to the second strategic dimension. U.S. human rights leadership makes Americans more prosperous by leveling the playing field for American workers, promoting the rule of law, which helps businesses protect innovation and resolve disputes peacefully, keeping kleptocrats and transnational criminals from stealing public resources or extorting American companies, and welcoming newcomers fleeing persecution who quite literally enrich our society. In other words, by prioritizing workers' rights, rule of law, anti-corruption, and transparency as core elements of U.S. foreign policy, bipartisan champions can help create greater opportunity for Americans at home, in addition to doing the right thing. I've seen this win-win dynamic play out all over the world, from concerted U.S. government, NGO, and private sector engagement that helped eliminate forced labor from the cotton sector in in Uzbekistan. They helped create new frameworks for garment workers' safety in Bangladesh and helped recover over $1 billion in stolen assets in Malaysia. All of these anti-trafficking and anti-corruption efforts have been halted by the evisceration of U.S. foreign assistance in these areas and the decision to discontinue enforcement of bipartisan milestone laws like the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. But this prosperity dividend also applies to U.S. efforts to welcome refugees, a multi-generational endeavor with a proud bipartisan and community-based tradition. My own organization, Human Rights First, helped secure the unanimous adoption of the U.S. Refugee Act of 1980, affirming the act of welcoming the oppressed as a quintessentially American value. Since then, we've learned of the immense contributions that U.S.-based refugees have made to the communities that welcome them. A U.S. Department of Health and Human Services study showed that from 2005 to 2019, refugees delivered net gains of over $124 billion to the U.S. economy in the form of jobs created, businesses launched, and taxes paid. This is one more reason why, in addition to saving lives and upholding U.S. and international law, it's critically important that the U.S. refugee admissions program and access to asylum protections be restarted without delay. Now, the third and final strategic dimension that I'd like to highlight is how U.S. respect for human rights universality upholds American well-being, especially when it comes to leading by example and protecting the integrity of our own democracy for future generations. I know successive U.S. administrations, including President Biden's that I served in, have fallen short in upholding human rights abroad, especially when it comes to applying human rights universally with U.S. partners, from Israel to El Salvador to Saudi Arabia, to name a few. But our current trajectory not only deprioritizes human rights in our diplomacy, but it is externalizing escalating domestic human rights abuses, from unlawful transfers of migrants to third countries and to arbitrary detention, to extrajudicial killings in Pacific and Caribbean boat strikes. This is why our active civil society, our free and independent media, and our separate and empowered judicial and legislative branches are indispensable to hold policymakers accountable to uphold the law and do the right thing. And it's why we collectively must robustly push back on any efforts to restrict civil society or dissent under the false mantle of fighting domestic terrorism. So faced with this existential crossroads for democracy and human rights, let's reject the path of least resistance, fear, or apathy. Instead, let's work together to rebuild bipartisan consensus for keeping authoritarians in check, for smart foreign assistance investments that help hold autocrats, U.S. partners, and kleptocrats to account, and keep human rights defenders and independent journalism afloat. Together, we can welcome refugees and other immigrants who enrich our communities and our national prosperity. And together, We must defend the freedoms and rights enshrined in our Constitution and reflected in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights adopted 77 years ago today that are the ultimate source of our national strength. Thank you all.
It's more and more inspiring as we go. Amazing. Okay, now we're getting ready to present the newest award UNA-NCA keeps giving the Human Rights Awards, and that is the Emerging Leader Human Rights Award. It started during the pandemic. It was 2020, 2021. 2020, right? Yes. Christina remembers. Yes. And this year is going to someone that is quite special, quite remarkable, and honestly has already emerged as a leader. So presenting the award is a dear friend and colleague of Oscar Lopez. Her name is Abby Finkenauer. Yeah. Thoroughly co-founder and principal for the Alliance for Diplomacy and Justice, but formerly she was the U.S. Special Envoy for Global Youth Issues. Abby is in Germany at the moment, participating in youth-related activities, but she prepared a video for us.
Hello everyone, I'm so sorry I can't be with you in person today. I'm actually currently in Germany with former members of Congress Association engaging some absolutely amazing young leaders, but there was no way I was going to miss the chance to celebrate one of my favorite young leaders I've ever had a chance to work with, and someone as extraordinary as Oscar Lopez. Someone whose leadership, courage, and integrity have left a mark not only on UN spaces and youth spaces he has shaped, but on everyone lucky enough to work alongside him, myself included. You see, I first met Oscar during my time as the U.S. Special Envoy for Global Youth. In that role, I spent a lot of time moving through rooms full of incredibly talented young leaders. But every so often, one person stands out. Not because they speak the loudest, but because they listen the deepest. Not because they chase titles, but because they chase impact. For me, Oscar was unmistakably that person. From our earliest conversations, it was so clear he brought something rare into international policy spaces. A clarity of purpose, a steadiness of character, and a genuine lived commitment to human rights that wasn't performative or theoretical, it was personal. It was grounded in community, in compassion, and in a belief that young people deserve more than a seat at the table. They deserve to reshape the table itself. See, watching Oscar step into the role of UNA-USA Youth Observer and then into the broader UN and global youth platforms, I've seen him grow into exactly the kind of leader these spaces desperately need. He shows up prepared, yes, but also present. He shows up willing to build bridges, to ask hard questions, and to advocate with both courage and humility. That combination is rare, and it is the reason I have no doubt that we are witnessing the early chapters of someone who will shape this field for decades to come. You see, Oscar brings humanity into policy conversations at a time when that humanity is under threat. He brings truth into rooms where truth is often inconvenient. And he does all of it with a grace and steadiness that makes people lean in rather than pull away. That's real leadership. That's human rights leadership. And as he steps into this moment, being recognized as the emerging human rights leader of 2025, I hope everyone in the room understands just how right this choice is. See, Oscar isn't emerging, Oscar has already arrived. And I know with complete confidence that we will all be better for the impact he's going to continue to have on this field, on public service, and on the communities he cares so deeply about. Oscar, I am so proud of you. I am honored to have walked even a small part of this journey with you, and I cannot wait to see the doors you will open, the institutions you will transform, and the people you will lift up along the way. Congratulations, my friend. This recognition is incredibly deserved. And quite frankly, it's just the beginning. Thank you, everybody. Congratulations.
Good evening. I am the biggest Abby Finkenauer fan, and from her time serving in Congress to her time as special envoy, she's been both an inspiration. It was so special to have her introduce me, and I'm honored to have her be someone that I get to call my friend. Thank you, everyone, for being here this evening, especially at a night so cold. As a Texan, anytime it drops below 50, I'm staying home. I'm bundling under 1 million blankets. So this is truly special. And it's a profound honor to be named your emerging human rights leader at this year's Human Rights Awards. When I first received the news that I would be receiving this recognition, I was genuinely taken aback. I had just concluded my term as the UNA-USA Youth Observer to the United Nations, where I was honored to be the first Honduran American and Mexican American to hold that role. I finally allowed myself, for the first time in a long while, a brief moment of rest after a whirlwind year filled with flights, town halls, late night calls, early mornings, and countless conversations with young people across this country. And in between that rest time, I might have had my fair share of Netflix and catching up on a couple of shows, a couple of snacks. But quickly enough, I began preparing to return to the work that has always grounded me, advocating for a livable planet, for equitable access to mental health care, for an immigration system that protects those fleeing the unimaginable, and for an international system that upholds the inherent dignity of every person. I didn't expect to receive an award for doing this work. Like so many of my peers in the space, I did it out of necessity. When the conditions of your community threaten the rights, safety, and dignity of the people you love, you don't wait for permission to act. You don't wait to be ready, you simply act. And receiving this award tonight has given me the opportunity to pause and reflect on the journey that brought me here, on what I learned as youth observer, and on the work that still lies ahead of us if we are serious about building a more just and humane world. Parallel to the Rio Grande, my hometown of Laredo, Texas, is a vibrant community strengthened by an interconnected binational culture. The people, majorly bilingual, expertly glide from English to Spanish and back again, as though the mixture were its own language, natural and known. It's a city whose culture comes from a shared background, common story of families coming to the United States hoping to create a better future for their descendants, including my own. For Laredoans, Rio Grande is sacred. It is our sole source of water, yes, but it's also a living symbol of our identity. We don't see it as a wall between the US and Mexico. We see it as the thread that binds our two communities together. A reminder that our histories, our economies, our families, and our futures are fundamentally intertwined. And today, that river is under threat. Climate change places the Rio Grande at a risk of drying up within my lifetime. Extreme heat has already taken lives in my community. Whole neighborhoods struggle to access nutritious foods because they live in food deserts. Too many families lack reliable internet access, and too many young people and elders go without mental health care. These are not abstract policy challenges. These are daily realities that strain the fundamental human rights of people that I love. When you grow up surrounded by this kind of injustice, it does something to you. It shapes your understanding of what responsibility looks like. For me, that meant standing up and doing what I could to improve these conditions in my hometown. It meant researching the digital divide as the youngest ever Google Public Policy Fellow, where I worked at Public Knowledge, an incredible organization in DC that fights on behalf of the marginalized. And I'm grateful that the president and CEO of that organization, Chris Lewis, my first boss, is here. It meant helping my city pass its first ever comprehensive sustainable food systems plan through the Laredo Food Policy Council. It meant serving on the advisory board of Lady Gaga's Born This Way Foundation to support youth mental health across the country and fund hundreds of organizations who are doing on-the-ground work to make mental health care more accessible. It meant learning federal climate policy at the White House and then bringing that knowledge home by co-founding the Rio Es Vida Coalition to protect water access across my region. And now, at 25, I reflect that what's mattered most in all of that work was not the titles or institutions, it was the people. It was sitting with families who endured heat waves. It was students trying to log into school without stable internet access. It was young people doing everything they could to carry the weight of systems that weren't designed to carry them. Through all of this, I came to understand two things. First, as a border community, we cannot thrive unless we work with our neighbors across borders. Our survival depends on cooperation, not separation. Second, while communities like mine are often on the front lines of crisis, we're too often excluded from the rooms where solutions are shaped. That belief in international collaboration, paired with a deep conviction that those closest to the problem must also be closest to the power, ultimately led me to serve as the youth observer to the United Nations. In that role, I had the extraordinary honor of representing the voices of young people from across the United States on the international stage. I spoke at UN conferences. I briefed senior UN officials. I collaborated with youth delegates from around the world on documents reaffirming our shared belief in human rights and multilateral cooperation. One of these documents, which was even adopted as an official Security Council record. But what shaped me most were the rooms filled with young people. Throughout my term, I traveled the country on a listening tour to hear directly from youth about the world they're inheriting and the future they're trying to build. And it was not an easy moment to be young. I watched as humanitarian aid was rolled back, as free speech was suppressed, as the rights of LGBTQ+ youth and also the rights of women were rolled back, reproductive rights were attacked, as international institutions were attacked, and as indifference spread in the face of climate catastrophe, starvation, and war. At UCLA, students spoke honestly about how difficult it felt to trust global commitments. One young person told me, "It's hard to have hope for the SDGs." Across the country, I heard versions of this same fear. A generation coming of age when every certainty feels unstable, when suffering is delivered through their screens in real time, when the line between global and personal tragedy no longer exists. And yet, despite all of this, the young people that I talked to still chose hope. On the San Diego-Tijuana border, I joined hundreds of students who spent an entire Saturday afternoon imagining what the year 2100 could look like if we got things right. In Boston, a student shared with me, and I quote, "We have the passion and the plans, what we need now is support." And back in my hometown, students were studying the impacts of extreme heat in their own neighborhoods and organizing for protections for their elders and their neighbors. Young people understood that they were not yet living in the world that they deserved. But instead of surrendering to cynicism, they chose responsibility. Instead of despair, they chose action. And my message to global leaders was simple. Young people are ready to lead, and they're not willing to wait for permission to care for the world that will define their lives. The future that I imagine is one where every person has the right to clean air and clean water. A world where no child goes to sleep wondering where the next meal will come from, where no family lives under constant fear of bombs falling from the sky, where all who seek refuge here are treated with the dignity they deserve, and where privacy is not a privilege but a right. This vision is not unrealistic. It's not idealistic. It's necessary. And it's possible if we have the courage to follow the moral leadership that young people are already showing us. Throughout my year, I met young leaders from communities that have long been forgotten. Some had never been taught the language of human rights. Some could not name every sustainable development goal, but they lived the Declaration of Human Rights every day through their service, their care for neighbors, their organizing, and their willingness to speak up when something was wrong. What they lacked in formal education in the human rights framework, they more than made up in courage, compassion, and conviction. We've seen that the international system has been turned upside down, to put it lightly this year. But in moments like these, we must look to the leadership of the bold, and right now, the bold are young people. I'd like to share one final piece of my vision for our future. On the final weekend of my term as youth observer, I was invited to the United States mission to the United Nations to speak on a panel in front of students from around the world, students from every corner of the globe. I spoke about my time in the role, about what youth leadership had taught me, and I shared that my family was from Mexico and from Honduras. After the panel ended, a young woman approached me. She spoke to me in Spanish and she said, "Yo soy de Honduras. I'm from Honduras." Then she continued to tell me how much pride it gave her to see that the representative of American youth could look like her and could be from her corner of the globe and could stand on the international stage representing American youth. And that moment, more than any title, more than any speech, has stayed with me. Because my vision for the future is one where leadership, especially our leadership on the global stage, can look like every part of this country. Where young people from border towns, from rural communities, from immigrant families, from forgotten zip codes can see themselves reflected in the institutions that shape their lives. Where everyone feels represented in these spaces and where everyone knows that their voices belong. This year, as the world marked the 80th anniversary of the United Nations, we were reminded that our ideals must be made reality. The words written in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights cannot remain aspirational. They cannot live only on paper. They must become lived reality. They must become policy. They must become the norm everywhere. Something that we could see, feel, grasp, and experience. And young people are already building that reality. The young people I've met over the last year showed me that such is true. To be recognized tonight is an honor that I carry with deep gratitude and with humility. But this award is not simply a reflection of my own journey. It belongs to every young person who has dared to believe that justice is possible, to every student organizer, to every young person who's faced death for standing up for human rights, and for the many who have come before me and the many that will come after me in this fight for equal representation, equal justice, and a better world. Thank you for believing in young people. Thank you for believing in human rights. And thank you for reminding us that the future is not something we wait for. It's something that we're building together. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Oscar, for those inspiring words. As a grandmother, I'm really excited about the youth of the future because of your remarks. And it actually gives me a different way to look at the world, if that makes sense. And I'm just really proud for everything you're doing to continue your work. Now we move on to our last award of the evening, and this is a community award. And it's presented to persons or organizations who have provided leadership to advance the cause of human rights through a local group or organization in the Washington, D.C., Maryland, or Virginia area, and demonstrated personal professional contributions to advance the cause of human rights in the public, private, and or nonprofit sector. Tonight we have Patrice Amandla Sultan, who is the Executive Director for the Center on Race, Inequality, and Law at NYU Law, and a board member at Valari, to present it to Valari. Thank you.
Thank you so much. To learn from you, to be inspired by you, to be moved by the words shared here, and to be reminded of our collective responsibility. So thank you so much for letting me be here this evening. It is a tremendous honor to present this year's Community Human Rights Award to Valare, which embodies the very spirit of community power, dignity, and justice. As someone who has been lucky enough to spend a lot of time surrounded by people who are fighting for equality and meaningful change, I've seen that transformation happens when we invest in people, listen to them, and choose solutions rooted in humanity rather than harm. That belief is at the heart of Valare's work, and it is why this moment feels so special to me. Valare is more than an organization, it is a force for possibility. Every day, Valare stands with individuals who experience trauma and the far-reaching impacts it leaves on their lives, their families, and their neighbors. Valare understands that trauma is not a moment. It is a series of barriers that can shape housing, employment, family relationships, health, and overall well-being. And that is why the team doesn't simply address immediate needs. It helps people navigate complex systems, untangling the obstacles that trauma so often magnifies. The organization's new name even means to fly. It reflects our belief in the human spirit's extraordinary capacity for resilience when people who have experienced harm are met with the right support. In doing this, Valare makes human rights tangible, not as lofty ideals, but as living conditions. Safety, stability, self-determination, and survivor-defined justice. Whether through wraparound support, crisis navigation, economic empowerment, or simply showing up with care when people need it most, Valare advances human rights here in DC in the most urgent and local sense, and that local work has ripple effects far beyond this city. At the heart of this work is a leadership team who guides this vision with profound integrity, humility, and imagination. Bridget Stumpf and Lindsay Silverberg have built something that tackles every corner of the social change ecosystem. They're visionaries, caregivers, builders, and frontline responders all at once. And they don't just lead, they cultivate space for others to find their own power, voice, and healing. As a board member, I've seen how intentional they are about centering survivors' humanity and reimagining what justice can look like. We share a deeply held belief that all pain is real pain and that each one of us can make a difference. I'm grateful to play a small role in cheering them on. Tonight's award is a recognition not only of what Valare has accomplished, but of the world it is actively building, a world where dignity is non-negotiable when we create ecosystems of restoration. It is an honor to present the UNA-NCA Community Human Rights Award to Bridget and Lindsay and the entire Valare team. Thank you for reminding all of us what community-rooted human rights work looks like in practice, and for leading us toward a more just and trauma-responsive future.
Now we need to look this way.
in this moment where community caretaking is so needed, it is actually really special to have a gathering like this. And I'm incredibly honored to be here on behalf of Valare and to accept the Community Human Rights Award. It is especially meaningful to share this moment with my colleague and close friend, Lindsay, who is here with me and took the award back so I don't forget it or do something silly. But whatever strength I carry as a leader in this work is inseparable from the people who lead with me. Lindsay is one of those people. And she makes it possible for me to do this joy not only with purpose and courage, but with joy. And I'm so grateful to do this work with you, Lindsay. I also want to thank UNA-NCA, right in front of me, there you are, an organization who reminds us that human rights are not distant ideals. They are lived commitments measured in action. Through education and advocacy, UNA-NCA strengthens the conditions that people need to thrive. To be recognized by such a principled organization is an enormous honor. My gratitude extends to our board of directors for your leadership and to some of our emerging leaders on our junior board. I see former board members that are here. Thank you for believing in our vision. And to you, Patrice, thank you for the beautiful introduction and for your courageous leadership. Your work from DC Justice Lab all the way to NYU Law, even though we miss you, reminds us that human rights are upheld through refusing to accept systems that cause harm. Tonight, I want to speak about something core to our work at Valare, and really something for me that is at the epicenter of human rights in the movement: resilience. Not in the traditional concept of bouncing back. I mean, rather, resilience is our capacity to hope through suffering. Resilience as our collective power to fight injustices. Resilience as a human rights framework. What we know to be true in our work at Valare is that when trauma is left unaddressed, it pulls at the very threads of a person's life. It unravels their safety, their belonging, the basic condition that human rights rely on. It affects health, housing, education, our opportunity, and our connection with ourselves and those around us. We know resilience becomes possible when people are not left alone in their suffering. It's a collective strength. It's rewoven from dignity, validation, agency, and choice. Through the everyday ways that we help one another feel seen and supported. These are the fundamental conditions that every person needs to fully experience and express their humanity. At Valare, we provide trauma-responsive support during some of the most difficult moments of people's lives. Whether it's advocating to get a survivor of domestic violence relocated, or working to fight an appeal for a protection order for a survivor of stalking and protecting their privacy along the way. Our work is human rights work at the local level. And this comes with a great responsibility to lead community conversations that move us toward a more nuanced understanding of the root causes of crime. Real safety requires us to understand inequities, disconnection, and the unmet needs faced by underinvested communities, and to respond with approaches that drive safety, restoration, and justice that is rooted in our shared humanity. Our Director of Therapeutic Services, Reese, who's here tonight, recently facilitated an expressive arts support group for survivors of violence here in the district. After a participant described this space as a powerful source of insight and belonging, they shared that the freedom to express themselves helped them to feel safe to carry those therapeutic skills into their daily life. This authentic connection that our team works tirelessly to create allows us to face the shared human experience of suffering without losing hope. Thanks for doing that, Reese. To the Valare team, not only Reese, but Naida, Sasha, Lindsay, Patrice, so many of you that are here, this award is because of your commitment. You bring your whole selves to supporting survivors, navigating complex systems and holding hope at the hardest moments. You protect dignity in quiet, steady,
and consistent care. To the survivors we serve, thank you for continually teaching us what resilience looks like. You are the reason we do this work. You show us over and over again that suffering does not define us, and hope is both fragile and fierce. Thank you to the more than 13,000 survivors that have trusted us for support since our founding. Yet to ensure our impact reaches beyond any single moment, we invest in scaling deep through trauma education and helping to build trauma-responsive ecosystems where healing is possible. Through our podcast, Traumatize, if you want to check it out, Lindsay and I cultivate a shared language tethered to this understanding that connection is the antidote to grief, loss, and suffering. I try to live this every day in my own life. And on a personal note, as you might have noticed, I have an 8-year-old son here with me tonight, sitting right up front. And having him in this room, it deepens my sense of purpose in this work. Our children are watching. They learn human rights, not just from the documents, but the everyday actions that they see us take. Dash, you and your sister remind me every single day how important it is to invest in the hopes for our future. Being your mom is my brightest joy. And the work I do every day is because I want you to always feel like you can be proud of me. Hold tightly onto that wonder about what the world can be when caretaking is your daily practice. To everyone here, thank you for helping to build a community where resilience is nurtured. Human rights are upheld not only in laws and policies, but in the small everyday acts of care, being present, a kind word, helping someone feel understood, checking on a neighbor, supporting local organizations that strengthen the community fabric that we live in. Our capacity to hope individually and collectively is multiplied through simple collective acts of caretaking. Do them again and again, because this is how we build a community strong enough to spark hope, courageous enough to face suffering, and committed enough to ensure that every person's humanity is honored and protected. Thank you for your continued collective work of caretaking and hope making.
I'm sure you're proud of your mom, I sure am. So I think I challenged you in the beginning of the evening about how can each one of you, how can each one of us, continue this working on human rights and protecting others. There have been so many examples here tonight of how we can model our behavior and act, whether it's caretaking or building resilience. And so what I'd like you to do is have those conversations after this meeting and share with each other and encourage each other to take those steps. We here at UNA-NCA try to do this all the time, and we have different groups that you can join and have those conversations. We have them for young people, we have them for, we call ourselves multi-generational. That means at my age, you're very welcome, as well as the very young ones too. And so I would encourage you to participate in that. We could not have had this event without all of you being here. It's not just the presenters and the awardees, it's you as participants. So I thank you, and I thank those of you who brought children, who brought moms. I feel very inspired by the whole family nature of this. And I want to, again, thank you all for being here. I do have the announcement of our lovely silent auction again, and that will be in the back during this, and we'll let you know 5 minutes before it's over so you can sign up. But to close tonight, we're going to call on Alex Rimmel, who is our Human Rights Committee Chair, and he and his group have worked on this event throughout the year to close us out. Thank you.
Thank you, Anne, and to Paula and Anne and everyone else. Of course, this was not just an effort of love on our part, but, hold on, can you open this back up? Sorry. I didn't have it all memorized, I wish I did. All right. So, as chair of UNA-NCA's Human Rights Committee, I have had the great honor of being a part of this special organization and this annual ceremony. While I had the chance to speak with most of you, the awardees, virtually, tonight I have in person seen, heard, and been inspired by your stories, advice, and legacies. First, allow me to thank each and every one here this evening in joining me to celebrate the meaningful achievements of 5 dedicated recipients and their own invaluable efforts towards protecting and promoting human rights. Tonight, we were graced by 5 of the most dedicated individuals dedicated to justice, freedoms, and overall human rights. However, from those in attendance representing a true diversity of change makers themselves, to those in our staff team who work tirelessly each year to ensure this event is a success, the Human Rights Awards is clearly much more than just a celebration of awardees. This annual event represents an opportunity for everyone to make an unwavering commitment to better our communities, the spirit of the UN and its attitude towards human rights. May we take with us tonight, on this Human Rights Day, the energy and passion of all of our awardees, change makers, and human rights defenders, and devote ourselves to playing whatever role we can in being the change we wish to see in the world. We really are all in this together, in this fight together. So allow me to thank you once again and hope that you have enjoyed this truly special evening. I know that I have. Now, please enjoy the rest of the night, some refreshments, our auction, and meet some new amazing faces. Thank you.